The alien marketplace was alive with color and noise. Tall, curved buildings shimmered in the sunlight, their walls painted with glowing patterns that pulsed like living art. The air smelled of sweet fruit, sizzling meat, and spices Jack had never tasted before. Alien merchants called out in strange accents, showing off fabrics that sparkled like starlight and jewelry that caught the light in 1,000 tiny flames. Jack walked slowly, taking it all in. He was off duty, just another human traveler in a city that rarely saw his kind. Some stared at him with curiosity, others with suspicion. He didn't mind. After months in deep space, even the stares felt like normal life again. That's when he noticed her. The alien girl stood at the edge of a stall selling silver ornaments, her white dress flowing in the warm breeze. Her hair, pale as moonlight, framed a face so delicate it seemed unreal. She looked no older than 20 in human years, though her species might age differently. Her violet eyes darted around nervously, as if she was expecting trouble. Jack almost looked away until he heard it, a sharp whistle. It was so quick and strange that it barely registered at first, but his instincts told him it wasn't just part of the market noise. His military training screamed danger. His eyes swept the rooftops, scanning for movement. Then he saw it. A black-fletched arrow slicing through the air, aimed straight at the girl in white. Jack didn't think, he moved. His body slammed into hers, pushing her to the ground as the arrow hissed past his ear. Another whistle, another arrow. This one found its mark. Pain exploded in his shoulder as the arrowhead punched through muscle. He staggered, but stayed upright, positioning himself between the girl and the unseen attackers. The market erupted into chaos. Merchants ducked behind their stalls. Shoppers screamed and scattered. Somewhere above, the assassins loosed more arrows, their shadows moving along the rooftops. Jack spread his stance, making himself the target. Another arrow slammed into his chest plate, the impact rattling his ribs. He ignored the burn of pain and raised his arm, shielding the girl's head as splinters from a shattered crate rained down. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. Jack's breathing was ragged, his vision blurring slightly from the wound in his shoulder. The attackers melted into the labyrinth of alleys and rooftops, gone as quickly as they had appeared. The girl's trembling hands clung to his arm, her eyes wide with shock. Her lips moved, forming words in a language he didn't know. Then she switched to broken human speech. "Why?" she whispered. Jack managed a grim smile, blood staining the collar of his jacket. "Couldn't just stand there," he muttered. Her expression shifted, confusion, fear, and something else he couldn't name. Then his knees gave way. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was her face above his, her violet eyes glistening with tears, and the faint outline of figures in the crowd watching them both with unreadable expressions. Jack woke to the soft sound of fabric rustling and a faint scent of something sweet, like crushed petals and warm spice. The world around him was dim, the walls curved and covered with woven patterns that shimmered faintly in the low light. His shoulder throbbed like fire, every heartbeat sending a sharp sting through the wound. He tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed him back down. "Don't," a quiet voice said. Jack turned his head and saw her, the same alien girl he had shielded in the marketplace. She was kneeling beside him, her white dress now stained with a faint trace of his blood where he had grabbed her earlier. Up close, her features were even more striking. Skin with a faint pearl-like sheen, lashes long and dark against violet eyes that seemed to see far deeper than they should. "You should not have done that," she whispered, almost scolding but with a tremor in her voice. Jack's throat felt dry. Letting you take an arrow wasn't an option. Her eyes lowered, shadowed with something heavier than fear. "You don't understand. You should have let me die." The words hit harder than any arrow. He frowned, trying to read her face. "Why would you say that?" Instead of answering, she dipped a cloth into a bowl of pale liquid and carefully cleaned the blood from his skin. Her movements were gentle but quick, like someone who had done this before under urgent circumstances. Outside, muffled footsteps passed by the door. Jack stiffened, his soldier instincts firing again. The girl's gaze followed the sound, her body tensing as if ready to run. "They will come again," she murmured almost to herself. Jack leaned forward slightly despite the pain. "Who are they?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes flickered with fear. "Hunters," she said at last. "They will not stop until I am gone." Jack exhaled slowly. He didn't know this world's laws or politics, but he recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same one he'd seen in refugees, prisoners, and soldiers who'd lost everything. She was running from more than just assassins. And now, whether he liked it or not, so was he. The girl hadn't told Jack her name yet. She moved around the small, dimly lit room with quiet precision, checking the shutters, listening to every sound outside. The faint glow from a crystal lamp lit her profile as she stood near the door, her long white hair catching the light like silk. Jack leaned back against the cushions, his shoulder aching. "If I'm going to help you," he said, "I need to know what's going on." She hesitated, her hands tightening around the edge of the table. "Names have power here," she said softly. "But you have already bled for me, so I will tell you mine. Lyra." Jack repeated it under his breath. "Lyra, why are they after you?" Her gaze hardened, though her voice trembled. "Because I am the daughter of a High Council member. My father stood against those who wanted to turn our people into slaves for the war fleets. He was removed." She swallowed hard. "The ones who took power swore to end my bloodline so no one could challenge them." Jack's jaw tightened. "So they send assassins to kill you in the middle of a market." "They will keep sending them," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They have more eyes than I can count, and no place here is safe." Outside, faint voices spoke in a language Jack didn't know. Footsteps scraped against stone. Slow, deliberate, like predators circling. Jack's hand went instinctively to his belt, but his pistol was gone. Lyra caught his eye, her fear barely contained. "They are close," she murmured. "If they find you with me, they will kill you too." Jack gave a dry half-smile despite the danger. "Then it's a good thing I don't scare easy." A shadow passed across the shuttered window. The voices grew louder. Someone outside laughed. A low, ugly sound. Jack knew one thing for certain: these people weren't here to talk. The voices outside faded for a moment, replaced by the creak of wood and the faint clink of metal. Jack's instincts screamed. Someone was preparing weapons. He stood despite the pain, moving to the far corner of the room. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "They'll break in, and once they do, there's no way out." Lyra hesitated. "The streets are crawling with them." "Better moving than waiting," Jack replied. He tested the small side door, locked from the inside. With a sharp kick, the latch splintered quietly, and they slipped into the dark alley beyond. The night air was cooler here, carrying the faint smell of rain and distant smoke. The alleys twisted like a maze, shadows pooling in every corner. Jack kept Lyra close, his body between her and any danger, his eyes scanning for movement. A faint hiss cut through the air. He shoved Lyra to the ground as an arrow slammed into the wall where her head had been a second ago. Another whistle, another arrow. Figures stepped from the shadows, bows raised. "Run!" Jack growled. They sprinted through the narrow passages, boots splashing through shallow puddles. Arrows clattered against walls, one slicing across Jack's cheek, leaving a warm trail of blood. They burst out into the main street leading toward the city gates. But the gates were sealed, the iron doors barred from within. Jack cursed under his breath. The only cover nearby was a massive stone pillar. He shoved Lyra behind it as a volley of arrows rained down from the rooftops. Splinters and shards of stone bit into his skin, but he stayed in front of her, absorbing the danger. Lyra's breathing was fast, her violet eyes wide. "I can't lose you," she whispered, clutching his arm. Jack's gaze swept the street. There, a narrow drainage tunnel under the gate, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. It wasn't safe, but it was their only chance. He looked back at Lyra. "When I say go, you don't stop for anything. Understand?" She nodded, though fear still gripped her face. Jack took a deep breath, ready to make his move. Because one thing was certain. He'd rather take another arrow than let them touch her. Jack pushed Lyra toward the drainage tunnel, his body shielding her as more arrows shattered against the stone. They crawled through the narrow, damp space, the smell of moss and rust filling the air. When they emerged on the other side, the city was behind them, dark walls looming under the moonlight. Ahead stretched the alien forest, a sea of towering trees with twisting silver leaves that shimmered faintly in the starlight. Strange bird-like cries echoed in the distance, and faint motes of green light drifted between the trunks like fireflies. "Keep close," Jack whispered. They moved quickly, weaving between massive roots and ducking under low-hanging branches. But even here, the sound of pursuit followed soft footfalls, snapping twigs, the faint metallic rattle of arrows in quivers. "They're tracking us," Lyra murmured. Jack's eyes scanned the forest floor. The soil was damp, perfect for leaving footprints. "Not for long," he muttered, leading her along a stream to mask their trail. Hours passed. The forest grew denser, the air heavy with the scent of flowers and something faintly metallic. Jack set crude traps as they went, snare lines between roots, sharpened sticks under loose leaves. Twice, the traps caught movement. A sharp cry of pain, the thud of a body, but the hunters kept coming. By the third night, exhaustion weighed on them both. Jack let Lyra rest in the hollow of a massive fallen tree while he kept watch. His hand gripped the hilt of his knife, every muscle tense. Then, a muffled scream cut through the night. Jack spun toward the sound, heart pounding. Lyra's resting spot was empty. The forest around him seemed to close in, shadows shifting. From deeper in the trees came her voice, sharp with terror. "Jack!" He ran toward it without hesitation, crashing through undergrowth, ignoring the pain from his shoulder and cheek. Branches tore at his skin, but he didn't care, because if they had taken her, there would be no mercy. Jack burst into a small clearing lit by the pale glow of moonlight filtering through the canopy. Lyra was there, on her knees, her arms pinned by two assassins in dark leather armor. A third stood a few paces away, bow drawn, an arrow aimed straight at her heart. "Let her go!" Jack's voice was raw, echoing through the trees. The archer didn't lower his weapon. "Walk away, human," he said in heavily accented speech. "This is not your fight." Jack didn't answer. His eyes locked on Lyra's terrified face, her lips trembling as she shook her head. "No, Jack," he charged. The bowstring snapped forward. Pain exploded in his side as the arrow buried itself deep. His legs almost gave out, but he kept moving, fueled by something more powerful than pain. The first assassin drew a blade, but Jack slammed into him with full force, knocking the weapon away. They crashed to the ground, Jack's knife flashing once, twice, ending the struggle. The second attacker released Lyra and swung a curved dagger toward Jack's throat. Jack caught the wrist, twisted hard until bone cracked, then drove his knee into the man's chest. The archer tried to knock another arrow, too slow. Jack closed the distance in two long strides and drove his shoulder into the man, sending them both crashing into the undergrowth. The bow snapped under the impact. Jack's knife found its target, the fight ending in silence. Breathing hard, bleeding from multiple wounds, Jack staggered back toward Lyra. She rushed to him, her hands shaking as they pressed against the arrow still lodged in his side. "You're bleeding too much," she said, voice breaking. He gave a faint, stubborn smile. "Told you, I won't let them take you." She pressed her forehead against his, speaking words in her own language that he didn't understand, but the emotion in her voice needed no translation. For the first time since the marketplace, she wasn't trembling. She was holding on to him like he was the only thing keeping her alive. The journey to the mountains took 3 more days. Jack's wounds slowed them, but Lyra refused to leave his side, supporting him when his steps faltered. They moved through valleys lit by alien fireflies, across streams that shimmered like liquid glass, and along paths hidden under moss so old it muffled every footstep. Finally, the mountains rose ahead, tall, jagged peaks with clouds swirling around them. Tucked between two cliffs was a narrow pass, guarded by figures in silver armor. They raised their weapons as Jack and Lyra approached, but when the guards saw her face, they dropped to one knee. "She's home," Jack thought, relief flooding him. They were escorted into a hidden sanctuary. Stone halls carved into the mountain, warm fires glowing in iron braziers, the air filled with the sound of voices speaking Lyra's language. Safe. Finally safe. That night, Jack sat near a fire, his arm bound in fresh white bandages. Lyra entered the room dressed not in her simple white dress, but in flowing ceremonial robes of deep blue, embroidered with silver threads that caught the light like stars. A delicate crown rested on her head. "You're a queen now?" Jack asked, managing a tired grin. Lyra smiled faintly and came closer. "I was always meant to take my mother's place," she said softly. "But I could not have returned alive without you." He shrugged, though every movement still hurt. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," she said, kneeling before him. "No one else did." Her voice lowered, almost shy, but steady. "By the law of my people, when a warrior saves the life of one of the royal bloodline, they are bound to her, honored above all others. And the greatest reward is her." Jack blinked. "Her?" Lyra reached for his hand, pressing it to her heart. "You, Jack, are not just my protector now, you are my chosen. Every scar you bear I will honor. Every pain you took from me, I will repay with my life." She leaned forward, her violet eyes shining. "The reward is me." For a moment, Jack thought of the arrows, the blood, the nights running through forests. Then he looked into her eyes and smiled. "Yeah," he said quietly, "worth every scar."